Morning, gentlemen. These women have pulled out all the stops to create this false idea of gender equality. They've tried changing science, they control the media, and they're infiltrating every male dominated area of society. I got an interesting article today. It's written by a woman who sees the effects of this forced compliance. Let's check it out. It's entitled Dismembering Womanhood by Jennifer Fitz. Confession time. In daily life, the pronoun thing is off my radar. I live in the land of ma'am and sir, so everyone gets gendered, constantly. I'm not bothered if someone calls me sir, whether by a slip of the tongue or a genuine mistake. And like all the rest of the world, in my own routine courtesies, I don't ask to see paperwork. I just roll with whatever sex the person I'm speaking to looks or sounds like. That's normal life. Now, if you're like me, you were forced by your parents to say ma'am and sir under threats of violence. But it was all about respect. It's only in today's world where somebody would take offense to a sign of respect. There are times, though, when sex matters. Now, she's going to refer to a news report about a serial killer who dismembered women. Now, you may have seen the headlines. The one I seen, it said, "Woman arrested, suspected serial killer." I found it was odd because very few women are capable of that kind of crime. Well, come to find out, it was a transgender. Down here it says, the New York Post at least explains at the top of the article that Mr. Marcelin identifies as a transgender woman. I've seen other articles where she and her crimes are described at length before only mentioning in the very end of the story that we aren't speaking of a woman at all, but a man, because there are significant differences in patterns of male and female homicide. Sex matters. It's not really a surprise, then, that our culture goes along with the fiction of a male serial killer who murders and dismembers women while claiming womanhood for himself. Well, it's easy to be misled by a headline, especially if that's all you read. Another time sex matters is when speaking of reproductive systems. Only women menstruate, conceive, and give birth. Men do sometimes lactate, but not as the means of nourishing newborns. In the effort to somehow prove that sex is a mutable characteristic, it becomes a fad to describe sex-specific physical traits rather than naming the sex those traits belong to. Men and women cease to be persons with lived experiences and instead get named by their genitals. It's classy. Now it says sometimes men lactate. What the hell? You know what? I don't want to know. Let's move on. This desperation to divorce human beings from their bodies leads to some ridiculous, unscientific terminology. Chest feeding. You can't just say breastfeeding. Men and women both have breasts, and any lactation that occurs comes from that breast tissue. Lately, I've been seeing the word bleeder refer to women who menstruate. Again, terrible science. There are woefully few animal species that don't have a circulatory system. Men bleed, women bleed, dogs and cats and goldfish bleed. We sometimes even refer to trees bleeding. It's difficult to be any less specific than to use the term bleeder. In the desperation to erase distinctions between men and women, we're now lumping together menstruation, paper cuts, and maple syrup. Well, a bleeder, that's the valve on the bottom of your air compressor to drain the water out of it, ain't it? The recent fad for attempting to desexualize human beings reduces women to bleeders and chest feeders. Is a process of dismembering womanhood. Rather than womanhood being the sum of all the many diverse experiences of female humanity, womanhood becomes a disembodied abstraction built on stereotypes and labels, disconnected from reality of being the female half of a sexually dimorphic species. So they changed the meaning of centuries old language. They They want to desexualize humans and label someone according to each individual's own view of reality. We cannot separate experience of being a man or a woman from the experience of living in a male or female body. That's what being a man or woman, male or female is. I repeat, that's what it is. Because of this, yet another area where sex matters is in sports. And into that vacuum, men claim a right to female spaces, protected spaces, spaces women need in order to develop and thrive as women. Women who have spent generations fighting for equal access to education and to athletics are now told that their womanhood is whatever men decide it will be. And a woman who objects to men taking over women's sports, or a man insisting on undressing in a woman's locker room, is told she needs to hush up and obey her betters, or she can expect to be punished. So the push for equality has backfired and has given men more control over the definition of what a woman is. And of course, even if a female goes against the narrative, she's punished. They eat their own. In order to provide fair competition, all competitive sporting events categorize people by their capabilities. Depending on the sport, we use age categories, weight classes, years of experience, skill-based handicap scoring, or disability classifications in order to create as fair a playing field as possible. The value of competitive competition derives from playing someone as equally matched to yourself as possible, so that you and your opponent are both striving to perform at the limits of your ability. Now, sports are supposed to be fun and competitive. One-sided games they're not fun for the player or the spectator. The more competitive the sport gets, the smaller the difference in the skill level there is. Then it says another way we usually categorize athletes is by sex. We might do this for social reasons, regardless of whether there are significant differences in the typical male and female performance capacity in a given sport. We might do it out of the modesty in sports where players have intimate physical contact with each other's bodies. Recognize that we are sexual beings who rightly place limits on physical contact with the opposite sex. So see, some of us aren't as sexually liberated as these womenists are. If I had to wrestle a woman, there's probably a chance I would get aroused. There are women who don't want to play basketball with men and have to rub up against their sweaty bodies. Some quarterbacks would object to putting their hand between a woman's leg to receive a snap. I mean, come on, guys. Not everybody cares. Not everybody is as sexual as you are. We also create sex-segregated sports because men and women do vary in their physical abilities. But both need opportunities for fair competition at an intense level. Because humans are not just pieces and parts, but men and women, there's a genuine need for men's only and women's only sports. Now, I played a lot of football, and I've been the guy in the gold in this picture, and I've been the dude on the ground. But there's no way in hell a woman would survive in a real game. We're just built different. No matter how hard they try and change the science, reality will always hit them sooner or later. Now, that's just my opinion, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.